Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Raising the Next Gen podcast. I am here with Paula Odland, and she is a counselor at Connections Counseling. And today we're going to dive into a topic that I really care about because I feel like I'm in the midst of this. We're going to talk a little bit about grieving, mourning, those parenting moments, those caregiving moments where your kid transitions from one place to another. Paula and I have known each other kind of peripherally for years, but then just sort of getting to know each other a little bit better. And I'm super grateful that you're on. Welcome to the Raising the Next Gen podcast.
Thanks for the invite. I'm happy to be here this morning.
That's so great. So let's just dive right in. I have a senior. And this is my
high school.
In high school, yes. And this is my third child to launch into the world, and it doesn't get any better.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you for that, because I have 3 kids myself, and I've just launched the oldest. And so I keep wondering by the time my third gets to this point of going to the next thing, will it be as potent? And so already, right?
Yeah. I feel like I'm pre-grieving his going to college a little bit. But yeah, it's hard to transition from one phase to another phase. And I know that you work with families and parents and caregivers as they sort of navigate that emotional toll. And so we're here to learn from you about those sort of things. What is one moment in your parenting journey that you've kind of experienced that transitional grief?
Well, I think that, when I think about all these different milestones, I think back on even some of the early ones, like when a kiddo is graduating from, let's say, preschool into kindergarten. Mm-hmm. Okay. And those, to be honest, those were some of the first times I noticed this, as much as it would be something that I logically knew was like, that's the next thing. Like, yay, they're done with preschool and now they start school. I think both my husband and I were like, whoa, what is this? Yeah. Why are we teary, or why are we this teary and reflective about that little graduation cap and that little ceremony that some of these preschoolers are doing, and then that first day of school. And so I think that's what I think back on, is actually one of those first school timelines where it's an end of something and a beginning of something. Yeah. That's what comes to mind.
Yeah. I remember those little moments. I'm finding it actually harder with my youngest child, all those little moments, because it's the end of an era in some ways. When she walked out of the 5th grade for the last time, I realized I was never going to have an elementary school kid again. Mm-hmm. And even though I hated being in the parking lot for like 45 years of my life or whatever that was, it was just and it was emotional for me.
Yeah.
To be able to navigate that and to call that sort of a real grief in some ways.
Yeah. So the interesting part, I think, about this topic is that when we talk about grief, because in a counseling setting, people come in the door for so many different reasons. They're having different types of pain. And I have noticed such a common denominator from your really big, obvious points of grief, that's maybe the reason somebody's coming in for counseling. I'll say, well, why are you here? And they'll say, well, I lost my dad, 3 months ago. And I say, okay, well, that's the defined pain. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just so interesting how this kind of grief, it's so common, it's so universal, and it's actually probably phrased as like it's just like uncomplicated, right?
Sure.
But it shows up in people's stories across the board, where they're not even as aware of it as something they're holding or something they're thinking about. But it really is this precious and kind of sacred thing that's happening, especially if you have multiple kids. It's happening kind of interactionally and fluidly throughout time. And it's just one of those human, experiences that it's tender and it's meaningful. But I find that it's something that if you pay attention to it, you'll be in conversation with somebody over, anything. And all of a sudden you'll go, oh, that's that grief.
Yeah,
That there's a change happening, and you might reach out to somebody and just kind of go, oh, no, where are they at again?
Yeah.
You know, and how are they doing? You know, you just asked me that as we sat down today and said, well, how's she doing, your daughter? And I said, well, really well, right? But that's that connection over this kind of grief. It's just kind of a common or a familiar way to process.
Right. I having launched 2 children, and I have 2 children still at home, it's all been different. My oldest son, when he went to college, he was ready to be out of the house. Like, he needed to do a little bit of growing up, and I grieved his loss. I set a dinner table that had 6 plates and realized we were down to 5. And but I knew that he needed to be able to kind of grow up in that way. My daughter, on the other hand, when she went to college, she and I were such good friends in high school. And, well, not like in an inappropriate friendship sort of way, but like we were just, it was a different kind of relationship.
Connected.
And so I felt like I really sort of lost a friend when she went to school. Get this is the most embarrassing, but I'll tell you anyway. After I dropped her off, my husband and I got in the car. We dropped her off in D.C. and we were driving back from D.C. and I played that song, Ain't No Sunshine When She's Gone.
Why would you do that?
I needed to get
That
off.
was like self-inflicted.
It was
like, I'm going to make myself grieve this.
I really was. I was like, I'm going to grieve it out.
It's like, I'm going to go cut a bunch of onions up, just force the vapor reaction.
I was like, I'm going to just feel it all, right? I'm not going to
I am curious, what did your husband do with that?
He let me play it like 3 times and weep. And then finally he was like, you've got to stop. I think for me, I was just going to I was going to grieve it all. I was like, not going to hurt so much for an extended period of time that I was just going to get it out in the car on the drive home. So by the, so that I wouldn't feel it so much months later. Obviously it didn't really work.
Well,
but in my head, I was like, I'm going to grieve. We're going to just do it now.
That's that feeling of, it's a misperception really, right? About I am going to do this and this, and then this is going to get easier or better, right? It's like the cure sort of mindset around this kind of pain, which we know. I would say is kind of common to go like, I know that that's not how it works, but I'm still gonna, I'm gonna tackle this, and prevent. The thought that comes to my mind is how it is really healthy to cry and to weep a little bit and to mourn something. Even when it seems like, God, why though? It's so silly or it's light or it seems maybe superficial, but I think it's so healthy to have some emotion and to move with this kind of pain and loss. And so, but how you do that, people are just trying to prevent I don't want to be a wreck, or I don't want to be, crying in front of my kid or in front of other people. Yeah. That's an avoidance thing to say, that would feel embarrassing if I, I'm always crying or I'm always getting emotional about it. But I'm like, well, I know we don't love that feeling, but it's also, it's just healthy to sometimes have those kind of tears.
I know. I agree. And I think sometimes we in our culture, and you'll have to tell me if you've witnessed this, I think we don't do grief well. And we kind of keep it in counselors' offices, and we don't, or churches possibly too, but we don't actively talk about grieving those milestones, whether it be moving from preschool to kindergarten, whether it be leaving elementary into middle school. I have a friend that was just grieving because her son isn't playing hockey anymore. He just kind of got to the age and he wasn't going to be on the high school team, and that was over. But you think of all those years you spent, all those monies, all those weekends, all those friendships, and was grieving sort of that. We don't create space for those to be real griefs, I don't think.
Yeah, I would agree and add to that I think we compare grief. We may say something that would compare size or intensity of someone's grief experience. So that's back to if something's really complicated or traumatic, right? And let's say you're going through that or someone else is going through that, but you would maybe say well, I'm not going through anything nearly what you've gone through.
Right.
And then we would minimize as if, we shouldn't feel something, or maybe even a guilt of like, I shouldn't feel this way. And again, I would just say it's healthy regardless of sort of the type of grief. That yes, there's probably a proportion as far as what you're going to see with symptoms or impairment levels. I mean, if that hockey person, for instance, was 10 years later still holding onto the hockey bag and, smelling it, and, it's like, all right, we could probably all agree that's not proportionate grief response to that. But, if someone lost a child, right, which is the most horrific thing anybody could ever go through, in my opinion. Yeah. And they were still holding that child's hockey bag 10 years later, we'd be like, yeah, of course. But we do that, and it tends to minimize or create that sense of like, well, I shouldn't feel this. Or women do this especially, where they say things like, I know this is silly, or I know this is stupid. And they're kind of checking it out. They really want to say it and talk about it, but they'll add these other little buffers around it, like as if, right, oh, I know that's silly, or I shouldn't feel that way. And if we can be better as in relationships, right, to create that space and just say, you know what, that's your story. That's what you're going through, and that has meaning to you, so it has meaning to me.
I love that you differentiated those two, comparative grief versus, what was the word that you used? Proportional grief.
Yeah, kind of a proportionate level of response or reactivity. Or, I mean, in clinical terms, it would just be more about like, what's your impairment level? And then you would maybe, you would have a diagnosis that would fit some of that. If you're not getting up every morning, if you're not showering, if you are catatonic, well, there's extreme versions of that. But yeah, I think we get hung up sometimes on like, well, what's kind of the scale of what we should be feeling? And then there's confusion and sometimes in family systems. Let's say there's a couple and one of the partners is grieving hard over something. This one of these milestones, right? Go back to the last, let's say we have the last dance recital and there's a dancing dad, and he's just a wreck that he's like, this is the end of the era and I'm not going to do the dancing dads anymore. Yeah. And then the mom is going like, I've been ready to move on from this for a while. Yeah. And then they're out of sync with how the proportion of their grief is about it. That can be sometimes challenging, right? But again, I would just normalize it. It's people holding and interacting with the grief and the story and the situation all in their own way.
Yeah, no, I think we experienced that in my own household. So my older two are from my first marriage, and my husband, Ryan, I was way more aggrieved, a lot harder, all the milestones. And my husband, Ryan, he said, well, Angie, the truth is I've always had to hold them lightly as stepdad. He's like, I always had to hold them sort of open-handed. And so I'm kind of used to sort of holding them open-handed, even though he raised them since they were 6 and 2. And I think now that our, third child, the one that we have together, he's feeling what I felt for those other two. It kind of, the proportions have shifted a little bit.
This is where you roll tape back to, I would like to remind you.
I'd like to remind you that I
years ago
set a plate and cried for 2 hours. Yes. But and I think that's fair because, he did have to hold them lightly. They did have a dad and they had him as a dad too, but it was a different dynamic that we had to sort of navigate as we grieved sort of that move on, next step sort of thing. But I hear what you're saying about like the mom being done with dance and the dad just being all for. We grieve those sort of
the other way around.
Or the other way around.
I think I did that on purpose.
That's
just
all right.
to challenge it.
But in general, sometimes we are sort of done with chapters.
Yeah,
and that's okay too.
I was thinking about, when I'm well past. Open disclosure, I'm 50. Okay,
I'm real close.
I'm past like the baby stage, but when I see young families and they have little babes, it's that split reaction of one thought bubble says, oh, I am so glad I am not in that stage anymore. And I can make a very quick list to say the poopy diapers, I heard the story the other day where, my daughter threw up in her car seat in the car.
Yeah.
And I was like, yep, nope, I'm not missing that.
Been
That
there,
part
done
I'm
that.
done. Whoosh. But then there's so many pieces that if I see a little infant in the arms of their parent, I am just like mushy, melty inside. And I go, oh my, it just that nostalgia of
That
like,
nostalgia exists.
it just kind of comes over you.
Yeah.
And yet it's the same experience of witnessing these, this moment with someone else, yet you're having this range of response. And that's what I think is really fascinating about this kind of grief, is that you're going to have many, many different, thoughts and sensations and emotions around something that it's behind you or it's happening right in front of you. And then you're talking about the anticipation of a grief, right?
Yeah.
With your son is like, oh, here it comes, and here's the last of this, and I really want to savor this because I know it's ending. That's the anticipation. So
I think that actually kind of causes some anxiety, where
Sure.
I want to soak it all up so badly. Maybe this is my
better be present, right?
that I better be present.
And is that the quick side note is that where you take the camera out and you're filming, or is it where you put it down?
Yeah, that's
and you're really present.
Yeah, that's it.
Really, I love thinking about stuff like
No,
that.
I think that's true. I want to both capture it and then also be fully whole into it, because I do realize that those things are fleeting. I think I realize it more acutely with my younger kids because I have launched two. And, I have a son that's married. I have a daughter that lives overseas. And I realize how little time you actually get after they finish
Do
high
you
school.
think while they were going through those milestones, you were less aware, or you were not as present and savoring?
I think I still showed up and did all of the things. I think I was less aware of the grief that I was going to experience.
So maybe you're doing more of that. Like, I'm trying to grieve it before. It's your other version. What song are you going to play?
Where Sawyer goes off to college.
Never know what you got
Till it's gone.
till it's gone. That's a good one.
That's a good one. Oh my gosh, I love that.
They're actually good. We could put together a whole playlist.
A whole playlist
of here's the things that if you want to just dive right into
If you just
your
wanna-
milestone grieving.
Play it in the car after you drop your kid off
Let's think about
at
that.
college. It could
Love that.
There'd be a lot of things in there, I think. Isn't that incredible? But yeah, it's hard moving from one stage to another when you're raising kids. We say here at Calvary all the time, we say you get 936 weeks with your kids. And we don't do that to create anxiety in parents, but we want parents to understand, parents and caregivers to understand just how precious each of those weeks are. And I remember when my kids were little, those days and those weeks were so slow. Like there were days I could not wait for someone else to come in and sub out because I just I can't do this anymore, and but then as they get to be middle schoolers and high schoolers, they go so fast. And so just understanding that there is a rhythm and a pace, and then our job really as parents and caregivers is to raise adults. We want them to be great human, successful adults in the world, and so that does require this grief and this releasing,
I think
and this letting go.
Tending to, it's the both and, right? The emotional package again of we are celebrating, we are honoring, and even feeling, I think, a sense of accomplishment or even some healthy pride and God, we did this, right? Ooh, good. And we can have other feelings that also say, and release and change. I have probably a couple of these from my own, my siblings, four of us, 2 years apart, just unit family of 6. But when my sister, she might not like that I say, I've told her this, okay. But when she got engaged and she was the first one to plan this wedding, I remember feeling this sense of awesome, I'm so happy for you. They're in love and they're just good fit. It's just this celebration. And then I also remember feeling almost like a sense of, this is changing our family forever.
Yeah.
Now, this guy's going to be at all of our stuff. And he already was at all of our stuff.
I know, but now it's
it was
official.
just official and the savoring of one last day of just the six of us.
Yeah.
And how I can still go into that memory and feel how much we laughed and how much we just had this sense of like high five, right? Not literally, we're not that cheesy, but it was just like, God, what a great day.
Yeah.
But honoring that now the page turns and we were celebrating this beautiful thing that was happening. But I think that's really common as well, of like you're feeling the boost of this accomplishment and, the release.
Yeah.
And you're also making room for, there's other feelings there too.
In so many ways, it is holding more emotions in both hands to sit there and say like, all right, I'm going to grieve what was, and I am excited about what's to come. Whether it's moving from, crawling to walking, or preschool on, or launching a kid to college, whatever that looks like. I think God created us in a way where we can hold multiple emotions. And I think as people, we're not always good at articulating that we feel both of those things at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. Or if we are socialized also to say, well, aren't you happy about that? Isn't that a good thing? I do think in social scripts, we get into, like if I came up to you and, saw you in the community and just said, hey, how's the senior year going? And if you were like, oh, I'm so sad and it's the last. And then I might respond with, well, at least he's a good student and he's going to college next year and he's handsome and he's da-da-da. If I do that at least thing to you, do you see how like that now
kind of minimizes my emotional
it gives
feeling.
you the sense of like, oh, I guess I shouldn't have gone there.
Yeah.
And so I wish we were a little better at that as community it's back to making space, right? Of saying like, oh yeah, that does sound hard. And, that's it.
Is it.
Making empathetic, reflective statements.
Yeah, that sounds hard.
Yeah, that does sound hard.
It doesn't have to be that complicated. It can just be, it can just be a nodding sort of, yeah. Just one last question. When you think about your younger parenting self, what kind of wisdom and advice would you have given to younger Paula as you saw these milestones kind of moving their way through?
Well, I was the perfect parent.
Of course.
So this is a really hard question for me. I'm gonna have to go deep. Really, it's probably so cliche, but it's that like really savor, right? Like really take in. And I admit, like I am not a great archive kind of I've never been I'm embarrassed if I showed you my photo reel right now.
Yeah.
How few pictures I have of like everything in my life. It's fine, right? But I'm not saying I would go back and take more pictures or more video, but I absorb things in feelings sometimes and sensations, and maybe I do wish a little bit more that I would have, collected more stories, because I do feel like I would love to pass that along.
Yeah,
I think this kind of grief can also be something where you have certain stories that you hold and then you tell them to your kids, and then they internalize them. It's like, this is how it used to be a long, long time ago when you'd have just the fire, right? And tell stories. You would express those stories. So I think I would tell my younger self, like, write down a few more, like just what are those clever little bits that your kids said, and what's more of the explicit parts of that story that I maybe have lost? Because I can tell you feelings, but I do wish I would have maybe held a few more so that I could share those. Because right now I look at that Christmas. Does everybody have this where you have like at least one tree, or maybe on your main tree you have the little ornaments?
Yeah. Yep. We put them all up.
I mean, that's good grief. I love that, and I do that. But I'll have my, the the kids might help with it, or if I put one up, I'll say, oh, and then, they like, Mom, but I'm like, this was this, but I can tell them like, you were so cute.
Yeah.
That's all I got. I don't have the when you brought this home, you looked at me and then you said this. And so maybe that's just me going like
some more stories.
I'm reaching at where do I have any more that I could share to them so that, they could maybe hold that or tell that to their kids. Because my parents did a pretty good job with that.
Yeah.
My mom wrote lots of little clippy stories, and then it's in like my little baby book and my little scrapbook, and I didn't do that.
I didn't do a great job with my older two, but to be fair, I was pretty young. But then with my son Sawyer, this is all I did, is I gave him a Gmail when he was little. Like, oh my gosh. And then I added stuff to his Google Calendar, like lost first tooth. Like, it was so he could actually search his email or his calendar to find out when he lost his, and I would put little 2-sentence stories in there. But that was my way of archiving.
That's really clever though. Way to go.
But I was like, it needs to be so fast because at that point,
still a little bit of something.
It was real funny though.
So what's your answer to that question of your younger parent self?
How to be less distracted. There's so many things in life vying for our attention.
What were you distracted by back then?
I was in seminary. I was working.
The Lord.
Oh no. And so just at some points I just feel like I'd be thinking about work or things like that rather than being fully present with my kiddos. And I certainly have moments where I was present with them, but I think if I could go back, I would just absorb them a little bit more. That's what I would do. And now I'm going to tear up, It's funny. My oldest is almost 29. I was at his house 2 weekends ago, and I caught myself just staring at him. And he looked at me and he's like, Mom, you're being weird. And I was like, you're just this incredible man. He's this great husband. He works hard. He takes good care of himself. And, but when I stare at him, I see all of it. I see the baby he was. I see the challenges we had. I see his first steps and his baby giggles. And, so I do think I did absorb it, but at the same time, like, I don't know. I just wish there was more.
You're doing it now.
Yeah. Yep.
So I think,
yeah.
I know we can't go back, but
no,
but you're noticing it and now you're fostering that more and creeping your kids out.
And definitely creeping for sure.
Mom,
What are
you doing?
He's so gentle with me. We laugh a lot. There's only 20 years between us because I was 19 when I had him. And now he's realizing that is not a very big gap. He's like, I have friends that are closer to your age than my age. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like we were young and we were figuring it out and all the things. And in some ways that parenting, that was different because I was still trying to figure out school and pay rent and buy groceries. So all the things that we had to, so I was distracted with all those things. My questions back then were, how am I going to make enough money to get through the grocery store this week? And so those were real fears that I spent a lot of time on. So, and so parents and caregivers out there, like it's real. Like you have to give yourself so much grace in this parenting journey. So
absolutely
good. Hey, Paula, this was a wonderful conversation. I'm really grateful for your willingness to come in here today and talk to us here at Raising the Next Gen. If people want to connect with you, it's Connection Counseling.
Connection Counseling. Yeah, I have a private practice here in Alexandria, and I'm not taking kind of new clients as far as like individuals, but I have couples therapy that I do, and I'm taking new couples all the time. And then I do a lot of EAP work. So that's again where
EAP.
People have that benefit. It's an employee assistance program.
Okay.
And I have a lot of contracts where I do that kind of work, I see a lot of grief through EAP.
Yeah.
And I love that when people use their benefit because it addresses a lot of these life situations and adjustments going on. It actually sometimes helps prevent bigger, clinical disorders from coming up. So yeah, I'm out there, and I told you pre-interview, I was like, I'm not really out there, so I don't have like a bunch of, and find me here and find me there. Like, just find me at Aldi's.
Yeah,
I'm usually at Aldi's, walking around.
I'm at Aldi's too,
savoring and planning my next meal.
Going down the fun aisle.
Oh, I do get stuck in that aisle.
I get stuck in my own aisle too.
So, well, this was lovely.
Thank you for being on here. I'm super, super grateful. Hey, friends, thanks for joining us for the Raising the Next Gen podcast. I want to invite you to subscribe and then to share. You definitely know a parent or caregiver who is grieving a transition. So consider sharing this episode with them and letting them know that they are not alone in it. Thanks so much for being here.